In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through the start to finish process of making my newest design, the Ivy cardigan. I'm really excited for you to try this one out, but before we get started, we have a few different things that we need to cover. For starters, I'm going to have timestamps linked in the description below, so if you're looking to skip to any different part of this tutorial, make sure to check that out so you can find the exact spot that you're looking for. And if you are following along this YouTube tutorial, I figured it is worth mentioning. I also have the free pattern for this available on my website, and if you would like to get a copy of the ad-free PDF to this pattern, it will be available for sale in my Etsy shop, which is linked in the description. If you enjoy this pattern and this tutorial, make sure to subscribe to my channel because it really helps me out. And with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get right into our cardigan. Let's start by covering the different materials that you're going to need for your cardigan. First off, we are going to need a 5mm crochet hook. The one that I'm using today is the 5mm Tulip Edamo Red. We're also going to need a pair of scissors, some tapestry needles, and then also a stitch marker. This is optional. You might not need this, but it's always just good to have on hand. This pattern is designed with Premier Cotton Sprout worsted, which is a really nice lightweight cotton that's perfect for summery garments and all those sorts of things. So this is the yarn that I made my first one in, but I also recommend using Lily Sugar and Cream cotton yarn, or you could also use Karen Cotton Cakes yarn. Both of those are great options for a weight 4 cotton yarn. The main thing is that you use a weight 4 yarn for this project just to keep the measurements as accurate as possible. Today I'm actually going to be making our cardigan in Lion Brand Heartland yarn. This is an acrylic yarn, but I really like this color. I believe this is the color Grand Canyon. We'll get into the exact amount of yarn, the yardage, and the amount of skeins you will need for this project after we make our gauge swatch. So we're ready to go ahead and start with our gauge swatch. I know this is not the most fun part of making a crochet garment, but it is really important. So go ahead and grab the yarn that you plan on using for this project, and regardless of what size you're making, we are going to start by chaining 27. All right, I've got those 27 chains on my hook, and so we're going to start by working into the 5th chain from our hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to be working into this one right here. You're going to start by yarning over. We're going to insert into that chain. You're going to yarn over and pull up a loop for a total of 3 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So we just created a double crochet here. And this is the pattern we're going to be using throughout our garment. So we're going to chain 1, we're going to skip the next chain on our hook, and then we're going to double crochet into the next chain. So skip this one, double crochet here. And we're just going to repeat this across the row. So chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. And we're going to repeat this till we get to the end, and your last stitch should be a double crochet. So the reason why it's so important that we make our gauge swatch is to make sure that all of our measurements are accurate. There's truly nothing worse than making a garment and realizing that it is not the exact size and fit that you were hoping it would be. And making a gauge swatch just helps us make sure that things are as accurate as possible, and we can make the adjustments needed to make sure that the garment fits correctly. I'm at my last repeat for the row, so I'm going to chain 1, and then in this last stitch here, we are going to double crochet. Row 2 is going to be the row that we repeat for the remainder of our gauge swatch. And so what we're going to do in row 2 is we're going to chain 4. You're going to turn your work, and then we're going to be skipping this first double crochet right here. Instead, we're going to make our next double crochet into this chain space right here. So work that double crochet, chain 1, we're going to skip the double crochet, working into this chain space here. So for the remainder of this project, we're just going to be working in the chain spaces just like this. Chain 1, double crochet in the chain space, and this makes it really nice and easy and just a very flowy project to work on. It really does work up so quickly, and it's just a lot of fun, so I hope you enjoy it. But we're just going to go ahead and repeat row 2 for a total of 8 rows. So after this, we're going to be doing 6 more rows, and to end row 2, you want to make sure that you are working a double crochet into that last chain space. So now I have 2 of these rows completed. We only have 6 more to go before our gauge swatch is done. So I'm just going to repeat row 2 6 more times and then I will meet back up with you. So I have my finished gauge swatch here. Now we're going to go ahead and take some measurements just to make sure that we are on the right track. So you can use a ruler, a tape measure, really anything that you have. And before we measure, I just want to say that the easiest way to count the rows is by counting the double crochet. So for example, this is 1 row, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's just a really easy way to help you keep track. So here's how we're going to make sure that we are hitting gauge correctly. So you're going to start by laying your tape measure down just like this, and we want to count how many stitches are within this 4 inches. So each of these double crochets is going to count as 2 stitches because we also have that chain up here that counts as a stitch. So for example, you would count this as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 right here. And you should have 18 stitches in the 4 inches, which also equates to 9 of these double crochets. So if you have that, it means you are on track and you are hitting gauge. And then the other measurement you need for your gauge is the rows. So 8 rows should be just about 4 inches, which it looks like I am hitting perfectly here. But if you are not hitting gauge in this measurement, the easiest way to fix that is to go back and change your crochet hook. So if your gauge is not big enough, you would go back and size up your crochet hook to a 5.5 or 6 millimeter. And if your gauge is too large, you would size down your crochet hook to a 4.5 millimeter or 4 millimeter crochet hook. I would recommend making another gauge swatch with your crochet hook and see how that looks. And if you end up getting better measurements, I would go with that. But I also should mention, I don't like to fasten off my gauge swatch because I like to reuse this yarn. Otherwise, it does just go to waste. So now I'm going to go ahead and frog this really quick. And then once I frog this, we're going to go ahead and get started on our back panel first. While I'm frogging this, now is a good time for us to talk about the sizing and our yardage. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that up on the screen here. You can go ahead and pause if you would like, but this is going to help you get an idea of what size cardigan you should make and also how much yarn you are going to need or the yardage. I like to go by the yardage because it's more helpful if you're using a different yarn just to get a better idea. So I'm going to be making a size small today. So I needed 3 skeins of the Lion Brand Heartland, but this information will help give you an idea of what size you should make and how much yarn you will need for that specific size. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and start on our cardigan. So I'm going to start by creating a slip knot for the back panel, and the amount of chains you're going to work is going to be different depending on the size that you are making, but I think I mentioned today I am making the small size. So for my size, I'm going to be chaining 97, but I'm going to keep the numbers of chains that you are going to be working for your size up here on the screen. And if you want more details on this, you can check out the free pattern on my website in the description to get more information, but the amount of chains will vary based on your size. So go ahead and chain how many you need for your specific size. Like I said, I'm doing 97, so I will meet back up with you once I've created all of these chains. All right, I just created all of those chains. This is quite a long chain. We have 97 in total, again, for the small size, and now we're ready to start on row 1. So we are going to look for the 5th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to be working into this chain right here, and we're going to start with a double crochet. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and chain 1. We're going to skip the next chain and double crochet into the next chain. And we're just going to keep repeating this across. This first row is definitely the most finicky, but once we get past this point, everything is pretty much smooth sailing on this back panel. So again, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet here. And we're just simply going to be repeating this across. And I'm almost at the end of my row now, but just as a reminder, we are going to be working a double crochet into this last stitch, so you're just going to be repeating that pattern across the entire row. But we're ready to go ahead and move on to row 2. Row 2 is the row that we are going to be repeating throughout the remainder of the back panel. So you are just going to be creating this until you get to your desired length or the amount of rows that is specified in the pattern, depending on your size. For my size, that is a total of 40 rows, but I'll make sure to keep it up here on the screen. So make sure you pay close attention to how we work row 2, because this is going to be how the majority of the pattern is constructed. So we have our chain 4 here. We're going to go ahead and work a double crochet into that first chain space. So right here, And it is pretty similar to row 1, where we're just going to be doing a chain 1. We're going to double crochet into that chain space, chain 1, and then work again into that chain space. So here's really where you will start to hit your groove, because it does really start to work up very quickly. Since you're working into these chain spaces, you don't have to be as accurate with making sure you're working directly into the top of the stitch, and it just starts to flow really nicely. And essentially you're just going to keep repeating this chain 1, double crochet into the chain space, chain 1, and keep doing that across. And so here is what things should be looking like at this point. You will have that double crochet in between in that chain space. So just keep repeating this until you reach the end of the row. So I'm almost at the end of row 2. We're going to go ahead and work a double crochet into this last chain space here, and that is the end of row 2. Again, this is what we're going to be repeating until we get to our desired row length. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this back panel. Again, the exact row count will depend based on your sizing, but I'll make sure to put it up here on the screen. And if you need any extra help with row 2, make sure to just rewatch this section of the video. So I have my back panel finished up here. I went ahead and fastened off and wove in my ends. I have it folded up so it looks a little bit smaller than it is, but at this point I would recommend checking your measurements and making sure that everything is accurate based on the sizing guide that I've provided. But at this point we're going to go ahead and start on our front panel. So the way that the front panel is going to work is we are going to be making 2 of them, and then there's going to be a neckline shaping at the top portion of each, one for the left side and one for the right side. They're worked nearly the exact same way, except one is mirrored off of the other one, if that makes sense. So each of the front panels is going to be following the same pattern up until the neckline shaping. So this next part that I'm going to show you, we are going to be making 2 of. So after you finish the first panel, you're going to want to come back to this section of the video before starting on the neckline shaping. So to start our front panel, we're going to begin by chaining the length for our size. So for me and my size small, it's going to be 49 chains. I'll put it up on the screen so you know how many to chain for your size. And we're going to be following the exact same pattern that we used for our back panel. So we're going to start by working a double crochet into the 5th chain on our hook. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to work into this one right here. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And again, this first row is definitely the most finicky because we're just working into these chain stitches, but essentially, again, we are going to chain 1, skip a chain stitch, and work into the next one on the hook. And we're just going to repeat this across the entire first row. And just as a reminder, you should end with a double crochet in the last chain. If not, then I would go back and check and make sure you have the correct amount of chains for your size. I just finished up row 1 of our front panel, and now I'm going to show you how we are going to work row 2. So we're essentially just going to be repeating until we get to the neckline shaping. So for me, that means I have 30 total rows before I get to neckline shaping. We're going to begin by working a double crochet into our chain space, chain 1, and double crochet into that next stitch. And we're simply just going to be repeating this across the row just like we did for the back panel. Row 2 is done, and this is what things should be looking like. So from this point on, you're going to go ahead and repeat for the specified amount of rows for your specific size. For me, that means I have 28 more rows to go for the size small. So I'm going to go ahead and work those off camera and meet back up with you, and then we'll go ahead and start on our right neckline shaping. Alright, I just finished the 30 rows for the front panel of my cardigan, and I'm ready to move on to the right neckline shaping. So at this point, what we're going to do is every other round, we're going to be working 1 decrease, and that's going to create a shape that makes our front panel start to move like this. So I'm going to show you how we're going to work the decrease, and so we're going to start by chaining 4, and then instead of working into this first chain space like we have been, all all we're going to do is just work our first double crochet into this next space right here. So essentially for the decrease rows, we are just skipping this space and working right here. That's really the only thing that's going to change. So now all I'm going to do is just keep working across this row just like I have been. I just finished up our first decrease row, and it might not look like much at this point, but after we do this about 5 times, you're really going to start to see it come inward like this. But next we're going to work on our regular row in the neckline shaping. There's no decrease in this next row, and we're going to just be alternating back and forth between these two. So for this row, you're just going to work as usual into that first chain space. You're going to chain 1, double crochet in the next chain space, and we're just going to keep repeating this all the way across. When you get to the last chain space on your hook, you're just going to work this as usual right here. And then now we're ready to move on to our next decrease row. So to do so, we're going to start by chaining 4, and then we are going to turn our work. And just like before, we're going to skip this first chain space right here, and we're going to work into the next one. So this one right here. And then we're just going to repeat across the rest of the row as normal. Now that I've reached the end of that decrease row, I'm ready to continue on working on the normal row. So we're working this row just like before and how the rest of the body panel is constructed. And essentially we're just going to keep repeating these 2 rows and alternating between 1 decrease row, 1 regular row until we reach the amount of rows needed for our size. And again, this will vary based on the size that you are making. So make sure to check with the free pattern below. I just finished that next row, and you can start to see the neckline shaping taking its form right along here. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue alternating between 1 decrease row and then 1 regular row until I reach my 40 total rows for the front panel. Again, if you have any more questions on this portion of the video, make sure to check out the written pattern where it is all explained in more detail there. My neckline shaping is all finished up, so I have the right front panel done here. I'm going to go ahead and weave in this end, but if you like to whip stitch your garments together, you could always leave this for sewing, but I'm just going to weave this one in, and I will use a different one for sewing. So now we have to make our left front panel. So you're going to repeat the steps that we took to get the bottom part of our front panel. I'll have the timestamps below so that you can find that more easily. And then once we get to the point where we are ready to do the neckline shaping, we're going to go and move forward to the left side neckline shaping. And we're essentially just going to be repeating what we did here, except we're going to be creating it on this side instead. So I am going to go ahead and work this front panel portion here, and then I will meet back up with you once I am ready to work my left neckline portion. So the main portion of my second front panel is finished up now, and we're ready to go ahead and get started on the left neckline shaping. So this is going to be pretty similar to our right neckline shaping. It's just going to be reversed basically. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So we're going to start by doing 4 chains. And then we are going to work a double crochet into this first chain space here. And so we're just going to work across this row as normal until we get to the last 2 chain spaces. And then I'm going to show you what we are going to do there. So here we are with 2 of these chain spaces remaining. We have one right here and right here. So I have that double crochet worked on my hook. So I'm going to go ahead and work 1 more chain 1. And then we're going to skip this chain space right here. So we're going to skip over this one and then double crochet into the next one. And so that is our first decrease row. And this is going to be the decrease row that we repeat for a total of 5 times. So we just finished our first one. And just like the previous front panel, we're going to be working 1 regular row in between each of the decrease rows. I'm going to turn my work. And then this next row is just going to be normal, no decreases. So go ahead and double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet in the chain space and repeat that across. I'm just going to continue working this regular row right here as usual, and then I will meet back up with you for our next decrease row just to show you one more time in case you're still a little bit confused. All right, we're ready to start working our next decrease row. So I'm doing my chain 4. I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to double crochet into our first chain space right here. And we're going to work in pattern across until we get to the last 2 chain spaces on our row. And that is where we're going to start working the decrease. So I've reached my 2 final chain spaces of the row. So just like before, we're going to go ahead and do our chain 1, which I already have right here. We're going to skip over this next chain space right here, and we are going to work our double crochet into that final chain space, just like this. And that will conclude our second row of decreases. So you're going to continue in this pattern of decrease row, regular row, until you reach the specified amount of rows for your cardigan. So for me, I have 6 more rows of alternating between the decrease row and the regular row until I reach the end of my front panel. So I'm just going to continue working those off camera, but we're essentially just going to keep repeating this process that I showed you for the previous rows right here. And then once we do, we'll be ready to move on to our sleeves, and then we're almost going to be done at that point. All right, I just finished my 40 rows of the front panel. Here is our neckline shaping. I'm going to go ahead and fasten off and weave in my ends really quick. I actually have my panel upside down, so technically this is the wrong side facing up, because since we just did the left neckline shaping, it's actually going to be laying like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and weave in those ends, and then we're going to go ahead and get started on our sleeves. So now it's time for our sleeves, and these are going to go pretty quickly because they're not very long at all. They're only 6 rows total. So we're going to go ahead and start, and you're going to chain your desired length based on your size. For the size small, that is 51 chains. I have all of my chains completed, so now we're going to work a double crochet in the 5th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right here, and just like before, using the exact same pattern we've been using throughout the rest of this cardigan, we're skipping a chain, double crocheting into that next chain. We do a chain 1 in between, skip 1, double crochet here. And I'm just going to be repeating this across, no decreases or anything like that. It's really just going to be a tiny rectangle, just like how we've done for the front panel, for the back panel. So we're basically just going to be repeating the same pattern. For the size small, it's a total of 6 rows. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the remainder of row 1, just like we have been for all of these base rows. And then I'm going to meet back up with you to show you round 2, and that's the row that we're going to be repeating for the remainder of the sleeve. All right, so for row 2, we are doing our chain 4. We're going to turn and double crochet in that first chain space. We're going to chain 1, double crochet in the next chain space, chain 1, double crochet in the next chain space. And we're just going to be repeating this across the entire row. And we're going to be repeating row 2 until we have the desired amount of rows needed for our size. So again, for my size small, that is a total of 6 rows. So I'm just going to keep working in pattern for the remainder of my rows, and we will meet back up when we're finished with our sleeve, and I'm going to show you how to close it. So I just finished up my sleeve. I'm going to show you how we are going to close this up. So a quick way for you to tell if your right side is facing forward is if your yarn tail is at the bottom right, like this. So my right side is facing forward, but we want to make sure that the seam of our joint is on the inside. So I'm going to turn my work this way. So you should have your tail up here like this. And then what we're going to do is we still have our yarn and hook attached here. So we're going to go ahead and fold this in half like this. So the wrong side is facing out right now. I'm going to insert my hook back into my stitch like this, and then I'm going to be working through both pieces here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by inserting my hook through this front piece like this, and then we're going to go through the next piece like that. And we're basically just going to be working slip stitches to join, but you want to make sure that your hook and your yarn are a little bit more loose, because these stitches can tighten up really quickly, and you definitely don't want to ruin your sleeve by doing that. So I like to just really loosen things up like this. You could even grab a bigger hook if that helps you, but we're essentially just going to be slip stitching everything shut. And you want to be working somewhere around 2 slip stitches for each double crochet, but you can really just do whatever feels right. 2 slip stitches per double crochet is about what I find to be right for me, but you can definitely adjust this. And so we're just going to do this across. And so see, I'm keeping my hook and my yarn very loose here. These stitches are a little bit bigger just to give some wiggle room. And so for my size, I end up having roughly 12 slip stitches to close my sleeve. So double the amount of rows is what you want to aim for your slip stitch total. So I have 6 rows in my sleeve. I have 12 slip stitches to close. At this point, this is a good time to leave a longer tail of your yarn, maybe about 2 feet long for sewing. So I'm just going to chain 1 and pull that tail through. And then I'm going to go ahead and weave in this end right here. So just weaving that in super quickly. And remember, we have the wrong side facing outwards here. So you want to make sure that you turn your sleeve back around. So this is what the sleeve should be looking like. Here we have the seam, the slip stitch seam that we made here, and there it is laying flat. Sorry if you can hear that thunder. We have a storm going on. So we have our first sleeve done here, and we still need to make one more. So I'm going to go ahead and work that off camera, and you can go back to this section of the video if you need some extra help with your second sleeve. And then once I have that done, I will meet back up with you. Alright, so I finished up my sleeves that you can see on either side here. I apologize for this angle. I know it's not the most aesthetically pleasing thing, but I want to make sure that I'm able to get this whole next process in one shot so that you can get kind of an overview, because it is now time to start assembling our cardigan, which is super fun and one of my favorite parts of this whole process. So to do so, I like to start in the same place, so I'm going to get on the ground and show you. So you actually have a few options for how you can do this next part. You can either do a simple whip stitch if that's what you prefer, or you can get out your crochet hook and do a really loose slip stitch, kind of like how we did for these sleeves here. So you can do either of these options, but the main thing is that you follow the same assembly process, I guess, that I'm going to show you. So I have my back panel here, and the main thing that you want to do is start off by having the wrong side facing outward, and this is going to ensure that we have the seam on the inside of our cardigan, because you do not want to have that seam on the outside. So double check and make sure that you are working with the wrong side facing out. So I have the wrong sides facing out here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this over so you can see it a little bit better. And at this point, you also want to make sure that your neckline shaping is on the inside of the cardigan like this. You definitely don't want to have this facing the wrong way, or that will totally mess it up. But what I like to do is start by joining up the front and back panels. I find that's just the easiest way to do things. So we're going to start with the slip stitch because that's personally what I like better. And so to do this, you want to make sure that you have everything lined up. So go ahead and try to line up your stitches just to make sure that everything is even. If you're new to this process, I would also recommend grabbing some stitch markers, maybe about 3, and this can just help to keep both pieces aligned as you start assembling, just to make sure that you're keeping things even as you work. But I've done this quite a few times, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like that because this will be a good enough guide for me. So to do the slip stitch method, I like to start on the inner portion of the front panel and work my way out, because then I can carry this down while I attach the sleeves and join up the back and front panel down the side like this. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work into our chain space right here. I'm going to insert my hook and go to the corresponding chain space of the back panel. So I just want to make sure I have everything nice and aligned. It's going to be right about here. So I have my hook in through both of those chain spaces, and now I'm going to go ahead and grab my yarn, and I'm going to leave a long tail so I can sew this in, and then I'm going to pull my yarn and hook through. And personally, I like to tie this in a knot here because then I know it's going to be nice and secure just like that, and we're good to go ahead and start. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook back through both of those chain spaces and chain 1. And at this point, you can work however many slip stitches you'd like across so that it feels right for you. Again, I recommend using a looser tension while you're doing this, so feel free to size up your hook to maybe a 6mm if you want to really make sure it's nice and loose. But I know I can use a 5mm hook and I'll pretty much get it right. So I'm just going to go ahead and work through the front panel and the back panel and just go through each corresponding stitch and do a loose slip stitch. And as you get to the edge, you want to make sure that you're keeping everything aligned and things are joining up in the right spot. So you can see I have 2 chain spaces left on either side, so I'm on the right track, but now is a good time just to double check that. And so now these are joined up. So you have that seam facing out towards us, and this is what things will look like while you're wearing it. You really can't see any of the seam, and it just makes things look very seamless. So we want to make sure that all of our seams are on the wrong side like so. So now we're getting ready to start by joining the first part of our sleeve. And so right now I have my sleeve with the seam facing inwards, and we're going to want to turn that inside out. So make sure that your seam is facing you while you're attaching this. Otherwise, you're going to be able to see that seam while you're wearing it, and nobody wants that. So we're going to go ahead and start attaching our sleeve. So to do this, you want to make sure that you're only working through one side of this. Otherwise, your arm is not going to be able to get inside of your sleeve. So I'm just going to go ahead and begin by inserting my hook into both and using one slip stitch just to kind of get a little attachment point like this. From this point on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch down one side of the sleeve and one side of the panel here. We're going to keep working this until we get to the bottom of the sleeve, and then we're going to start working through the back and the front panel all the way down. And you'll notice that we're going to have one side of the sleeve not attached yet, so we're going to have to insert our hook back up here to finish attaching this. Okay, so I'm working from up here so that you can see a little bit better. Again, I apologize, this is definitely not like the best angle, but I'm just going to begin by attaching one side of the sleeve to the front panel, and we're just going to slip stitch like we have been. I also recommend stopping every stitch or two just to make sure, if you've never done this before, that you're not accidentally attaching both sides of the sleeve to the front panel. This is another part where you could use stitch markers just to make sure that everything is laying nicely and you're getting things even. But honestly, I'm a bad influence and I never really do that personally. So we have one side of our sleeve joined up here. Again, now's a good time to make sure that everything is joined and you can pass your hand through the inside of the sleeve. And from this point on, we're going to go ahead and slip stitch the front panel and the back panel together down this side. So we're just going to continue here. So at this point, I recommend just making sure that your front and back panel are lined up like this. Line up your sleeve, and then from here, we're going to go ahead and grab our yarn and make sure that you are working into the next corresponding stitch. I just finished joining these panels together, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off my yarn and pull my hook through. So this is what it will look like on the outside, but now, as you might have noticed, we still have this part of our sleeve that is not attached yet. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into this armpit space, and then I'm going to attach my yarn. Now we're essentially just going to slip stitch up the back of this sleeve. Again, you want to make sure that you're only working through one side of the sleeve and one side of the back panel here so that we have an open sleeve. I just finished attaching the back side of the sleeve, so I'm just going to fasten off now. I'm going to start weaving in some of my ends, and then we're essentially just going to repeat this exact same process for the other side. So you're going to go ahead and whip stitch the front and back panels across here, work down one side of the sleeve, the remainder of the back and front panel, and then we're going to come back up here, reattach our yarn, and work the other side of the sleeve. So I'll meet back up with you once we've finished that up. We're going to weave in our ends, and then we're going to start working on the neckline and bottom trim. I just finished attaching this side and weaving in all the ends, so at this point I'm going to go ahead and turn it right side out. And this is what things should be looking like. You should have your seams on the inside and everything should be looking nice and clean on the outside. And so at this point you could be done if you wanted to, but I'm going to go ahead and do a neckline trim and trim along the bottom here. So we're going to keep this nice and simple, and you could do more rows of this if you want to. It's really all about the look that you desire and what you want to do. So for a quick overview, you're going to be attaching your yarn into this corner space of your right side front panel, And then we're gonna work up the neckline like this. We're gonna come around the back and then down this front neckline. And then at this point, we're gonna come around the corner and then we're gonna work down the back panel like this. So we're essentially gonna be doing this in a giant circle, but that circle is gonna cover the bottom and the front panel neckline, and we're gonna do it all in one, if that makes sense. But I'm gonna show you if you're a little confused. So this is just gonna be a very simple half double crochet neckline. We're not gonna do any ribbing or anything for this. So I'm gonna start by attaching my yarn into this bottom right panel corner. And then I'm going to tie it in a knot just like I have been, and then we are going to chain 1. And since this is a corner space, I'm actually going to be working 3 half double crochet into the corner, and we're going to do the same thing when we get back to this side here. So 1, 2, and 3. And now we're just going to continue this all the way up and around, and basically you're going to want to space out your half double crochets so that things are straight. For me, I found that this is working 2 half double crochet for every row that we have here. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to work 2 half double crochet into this chain space right here, and then I'm going to work 2 more half double crochet into that next space right here. And I'm just going to continue this all the way across. And depending on your yarn, your hook size, and all of that, you might find that 1 double crochet looks better or 3, and it really is just whatever is giving you this straight line like this. If you find any rippling happening, I'd recommend trying to size down your crochet hook, maybe do 1 less half double crochet or maybe 1 more, just depending. So it's really that simple, and we're just going to keep working up the neckline. And again, for me, it's 2 half double crochet. That's just what works best. And we're just going to repeat this all the way up the front panel. Even when we get to the decrease section of the neckline, we're going to keep repeating that there. And then once we get to the back panel, I'll show you how we're going to do that as well. And then I will meet back up with you once we get up here to the back panel. So I just finished working up the front side of this right panel here, and I noticed that as I got towards the top, I don't know if it's just this yarn specifically, but it was looking better when I was alternating between 3 half double crochet and 2 half double crochet. So definitely just base it off of how yours is looking. If you notice a little bit of a ripple happening, I recommend adding a half double crochet stitch here and there. But now I'm going to show you how we're going to work the back panel. So I'm just flipping it like this, and all you're going to do here is you are just going to work directly into the top of each stitch as you go across the back panel. So the back panel is super simple because you're just going to be working into the tops of each of these stitches. So I'm going to continue doing that across, and then we're going to go back down the front panel like we did on this side. And once we get to this bottom corner, I'll meet back up with you and show you how to finish off the bottom here. So now at this point, we have worked up the front panel, across the back panel, and back down this opposite front panel right here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to continue working down across the bottom of the front panel, the back panel, and the other front panel. So to do that, what we're going to do is we are going to pick up our yarn like this. So this next stitch right here where my finger is the bottom of the left panel. This is like the corner of it. And so since it is a corner, we're going to work 3 double crochet into this stitch right here. So now I'm going to kind of turn my work, and we are working along the bottom of this front panel right here. This is the bottom of the back panel, and then the bottom of the opposite front panel, just to kind of orient you a little bit. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to work across the bottom of the entire cardigan, making half double crochets. Again, if you have spaces like this, you'll want to crochet 2 or 3 half double crochets into them like this. And then once we get to the bottom of the back panel, you'll just start working a half double crochet into each stitch there. So you're really just going to keep on working these half double crochets, space them out, make sure to stop every once in a while to look and make sure there's no rippling happening or anything like that. And then I will meet back up with you when we get to the spot where we started working all of this trim. So now we're back at our starting point on the bottom corner of this front panel here. So I'm gonna go ahead and slip stitch into our very first stitch here. I'm gonna chain 1, and then we're gonna go ahead and cut our yarn, making sure to leave a long tail for sewing. We're gonna weave in our ends, and then we are done. And so at this point, you have your finished cardigan. I really hope you love it. This pattern is just so fun. It's one of my favorite things I've ever designed. But at this point, you can go ahead and steam block this. You can wet block it. You can wear it as it is. You can do whatever you would like. Personally, I'm gonna be giving mine a good steam blocking just to make everything feel nice and flowy. But that is it. That is our finished cardigan. And that concludes our Ivy cardigan tutorial. I hope you really enjoyed making yours. I know that I really enjoyed making mine. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other crochet related content that I share here on my channel. I cover everything from vlogs to tutorials like these to pattern inspiration and more. And don't forget, you can also find a free copy of the pattern linked to my website below, or the ad-free PDF available on my Etsy as well. Thank you so much again for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and until next time, happy crocheting. Bye!